Jin Wukong was the kind of man people whispered about in admiration and envy. At only 31, he was the CEO of Kongtech, one of Korea's most innovative AI companies. Cold, calculating, and perfectly disciplined, Jin Woo had built a reputation as the man who didn't let emotions rule him. He was also known for something else. He was celibate. Not by religion, but by conviction. To Jin Woo, love was a weakness, a distraction that could ruin men of power. He had seen what it did to his father, a tycoon who lost everything for a woman who betrayed him. So Jin Woo swore, never love, never touch, never lose control, until she arrived. It was at a private dinner party hosted by his college friend Miho Park, an architect known for his charm and romantic heart. Miho had returned from South Africa, beaming with pride as he introduced his fiancée, Felicity Johnson, a beautiful, confident black woman with eyes that carried both strength and softness. Felicity had skin that glowed like moonlight kissed by caramel. And when she smiled, Jin Woo's perfect composure faltered for the first time in years. Jin Woo, this is Felicity, Miho said, his arm proudly around her. Nice to meet you, she said in perfect Korean, her accent soft but distinct. For the first time in his life, Jin Woo forgot what to say. That night, while Miho spoke of his wedding plans, Jin Woo silently studied Felicity's laughter, her grace, her warmth, things that felt like sunlight to a man who had lived in emotional winter. Days turned into weeks, and Miho began involving Jin Woo in business discussions about the architecture project for Kongtech's new headquarters. Felicity, being an interior designer herself, worked closely with both men. What started as casual meetings soon became something else. One evening, Felicity stayed late at Kongtech's design office, sketching layouts when Jin Woo walked in. You should rest, he said quietly. I could say the same about you, she smiled. Her laughter softened him. Her presence awakened something he had buried deep: desire, emotion, longing. He found himself drawn to her energy, her passion for life. She, in turn, was fascinated by his quiet intensity, the man who seemed untouchable but looked at her as if she was the only one who could shatter him. It was wrong. It was forbidden. But the heart doesn't obey reason. One rainy night, after a project presentation, they both took shelter at Jin Woo's penthouse when the storm worsened. As lightning flashed through the windows, Felicity stood by the glass, watching the city blur in silver rain. You never talk about yourself, she said softly. Why? Because there's nothing to tell, Jin Woo replied. You don't believe that, she whispered. You're afraid of what you'll feel if you do. Her words struck him like thunder, and when he turned, his usual control was gone. He stepped closer, too close, and said in a low voice, You shouldn't read me that well, Felicity. She met his gaze, heart racing. And you shouldn't look at me that way, Jin Woo. Silence fell, and then he did the one thing he swore he never would. He kissed her. It wasn't planned. It wasn't polite. It was desperate, raw, filled with years of emotion he'd buried. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. This can't happen, she whispered. But it already has, he said. For weeks, Felicity tried to forget. But Jin Woo was everywhere. In her thoughts, her dreams, her heartbeat. Miho noticed her distance. You've been distracted lately, he said one night, trying to hold her hand. Guilt burned inside her. She wanted to love Miho, the man who was kind and safe. But her soul was no longer hers to give. Jin Woo confessed to Miho soon after, not out of arrogance but honesty. I love her, he said quietly. And I'll wait, even if she chooses you. Miho was furious, betrayed. You had everything, Jin Woo. Why her? Because she's the only thing that makes me human, Jin Woo answered. Felicity stood between the two men who had given her everything. One her promise, the other her soul. In the end, she chose the truth. She went to Jin Woo's office one morning, tears glistening in her eyes. I tried to fight it, she whispered. But I can't. You made me feel alive in a way I didn't think possible. Jin Woo looked at her as if the world had stopped. You're sure? Yes, I choose you. He pulled her into his arms. and for the first time in years, he smiled. Not the practiced CEO smile, but one of pure love. Miho left Seoul for a new start abroad, broken but dignified. Jinwoo and Felicity faced harsh judgment. From the media, from society, from their own guilt. But through it all, they stood together. The man who once vowed never to love became a man who learned to live for it. And the woman who crossed oceans for love found her home not in a place, but in the heart of the one man who wasn't supposed to want her. Seoul's skyline glittered like a sea of broken glass, and Felicity found herself standing beside Jinwoo on his rooftop garden, where the night always seemed quieter. The air was crisp. The world below buzzed with life. Yet up here, it felt like they were the only two people alive. Jinwoo slipped his jacket over her shoulders. "You shouldn't be cold," he murmured. His voice was deep, gentle, nothing like the commanding tone the rest of the world knew. She looked up at him, her dark curls brushing her cheeks. "You don't have to always take care of me, Jinwoo." "I don't have to," he replied softly. "I want to." Their eyes met, and the silence between them hummed with unspoken emotion. He tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, his fingertips grazing her skin. A touch so careful, as if he feared she might vanish. Felicity's breath trembled, her heart racing against his chest when he finally pulled her closer. "Every time I see you," he whispered, "I remember how much I tried not to fall. And yet you did," she smiled. "And I don't regret a second of it." He lowered his lips to hers, slow, reverent, the kind of kiss that said you're mine, and I'll never let you go. Their relationship became a secret melody in a city too loud to understand it. During the day, Jinwoo was the flawless CEO, silent, focused, untouchable. But when night came, his penthouse turned into their private world. They cooked together, or rather, Felicity cooked while Jinwoo watched, pretending to help. She'd tease him as he tried to chop vegetables like a businessman closing a deal. "You're hopeless," she laughed. "And yet you keep feeding me," he said, stealing a kiss from her cheek. When she worked on her designs, he'd bring her coffee and sit nearby, simply watching her. It wasn't about talking, it was about being. The world demanded his power, but she demanded his presence. And that was something new, something precious. Sometimes she'd hum softly while sketching, and he'd stand behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "I used to think peace didn't exist," he whispered once. She turned her head slightly. "And now it sleeps in your arms." Rumors began spreading. Photos of Felicity seen near Kongtaek. Whispers of the foreign woman, close to the CEO. Online forums called her names, twisting the story into something cruel. Jinwoo's board members warned him, "She's bad for your image." He ignored them, but Felicity felt the sting. One afternoon, she confronted him. "You're losing credibility because of me. I don't want you to." "Stop." Jinwoo's voice was firm, but his eyes were soft. "If they can't respect the woman I love, then they don't deserve to follow me." Her heart clenched. "You'd risk everything? For you? I already have." He stepped closer, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. "You're not a scandal, Felicity," he said. "You're the only truth in my life." She kissed him then, fiercely, desperately, because love, when tested by fire, only burns brighter. They escaped the city one night. No chauffeurs, no cameras, just the two of them walking hand in hand along the Han River. The wind was cool, carrying the scent of rain and cherry blossoms. Felicity leaned on his shoulder. "Do you ever think about how different we are?" Jinwoo smiled faintly. "Every day. And every day, I thank fate for it." "Even when it hurts?" she asked quietly. "Especially when it hurts," he said. "Because pain means it's real." She turned to face him, her eyes glimmering under the city lights. "You've changed, Jinwoo Kong." He brushed his thumb over her lips. "No. You just made me remember who I really am." He kissed her there by the river, slow, deep, the kind of kiss that silences the world. The water shimmered beside them. The city lights flickered like stars, and for that one moment, nothing else existed. Days became months. Felicity moved into a quiet apartment near Jinwoo's office. though they often spent their nights together in his penthouse, sharing laughter, whispered dreams, and silences that spoke more than words ever could. Sometimes, she'd wake in the middle of the night to find him watching her, his hand tracing invisible patterns along her shoulder. "What are you thinking?" she'd murmur. "That I've lived 31 years without knowing what love feels like," he'd say softly. "And now I can't remember life before you." She smiled sleepily. "That's dangerous, Mr. CEO. "Then let me live dangerously," he whispered, kissing her forehead. They didn't speak of forever, not yet. But every look, every touch, every breath between them carried a silent promise. Whatever comes next, we face it together. The morning started like any other. Coffee brewing, the sound of soul waking beneath their window, until Felicity's phone buzzed non-stop. Her breath caught as she read the headline flashing across her screen. Kongtech CEO Jinwoo Kong spotted with mystery black woman, secret lover revealed? There were photos, grainy, stolen shots of them walking along the Han River, holding hands under the streetlights. Felicity's chest tightened. Oh God! Jinwoo! The press! He was already on his phone, his expression unreadable. "I know. Don't look at it anymore. But it's everywhere," she said, voice trembling. "They're saying awful things. Calling me names. Saying I used you for money." Jinwoo placed his phone down and crossed the room in 2 steps. He cupped her face gently. "Felicity, look at me." When she finally did, she saw no anger, no panic, only calm strength. "Let them talk," he said softly. "They don't know us, and they never will." Her eyes shimmered. "Aren't you scared? I was scared before you came into my life. Now, I just know what's worth fighting for." He kissed her forehead, slow, protective, and for the first time that morning, her breathing eased. By noon, reporters crowded Kongtech's gates. Paparazzi swarmed Felicity's workplace, hurling cruel questions in both English and Korean. "Are you with him for money? Did you break off his best friend's engagement for fame? Is this some foreign romance stunt?" She pushed past them, eyes burning. It was unbearable, the way people twisted love into scandal. That evening, she sat alone in her apartment, lights off, scrolling through comments that pierced like knives. Then her doorbell rang. When she opened it, Jinwoo stood there, in a hoodie and cap, his eyes dark with concern. "I told you to stay away from the internet," he said softly. "I tried," she whispered. "But it's like the whole world hates me." He stepped inside, closed the door, and pulled her into his arms. "Then let the world hate me instead," he murmured. "I'll take it all. Just don't let them steal your peace." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I didn't mean for this to ruin you." He tilted her chin upward. "You didn't ruin me, Felicity. You saved me." Then he kissed her, fierce, consuming, full of fire and tenderness. A promise against every storm outside. A week later, Jinwoo called an emergency press conference. Cameras flashed like lightning as he walked in, composed but resolute. "I won't answer gossip," he began, "but I will speak one truth." He looked directly into the cameras, his voice steady. "The woman you've seen with me, her name is Felicity Johnson. She's a designer, a brilliant woman, and the person I love. This relationship is not a rumor, not a scandal. It's my choice, and I stand by it." The room erupted in questions, but Jinwoo walked off calmly, his statement echoing across every news outlet in Korea. Felicity watched the broadcast from home, hands trembling. He had said it, to the whole nation, and that night, when he came to her, she met him at the door with tears and laughter. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "I did," he said simply, "because you shouldn't have to hide love that's real." She touched his face, smiling through her tears. "I never thought anyone would fight for me like this." He kissed her palm. "Then let me be the first of many things you never thought possible." The chaos slowly quieted, though whispers lingered. Some admired their courage. Others doubted it. But inside their world, love bloomed deeper. Felicity spent her days designing interiors for Jinwoo's new offices, her creative touch adding warmth to his once sterile empire. At night, They'd cook together, share quiet laughter, or fall asleep tangled in soft sheets and slower breaths. Sometimes, he'd wake before dawn, watching her sleep in the golden light of morning. She looked so peaceful that he couldn't help but trace her lips with his thumb. When she stirred, she murmured, "You're staring again. Because you're unreal," he whispered. She smiled lazily. "You're impossible. And yet you chose me." She reached up and kissed him, slow and deep, the kind of kiss that reminded them they had both broken rules for something extraordinary. Months passed. The world adjusted. The media found new stories to chase, and their love quietly became normal. Two hearts learning to exist without apology. One evening, Jeju brought her to the rooftop again. The city lights shimmered below like fireflies. He handed her a single white lily, her favorite. "Do you regret choosing me?" he asked softly. Felicity shook her head, smiling through the wind. "No, Jeju. Loving you was never a mistake. It's the most human thing I've ever done." He took her hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "Then let's stop surviving the world and start living it together." She rested her head against his chest as he wrapped his arms around her, the city glowing beneath them like a promise kept. And for that moment, neither of them cared about tomorrow. Only the heartbeat that echoed between them, strong and certain. After months of flashing cameras and whispered headlines, Jeju decided they needed air. A place where they could breathe without walls, titles, or judgment. "Pack light," he told Felicity one evening. "Where are we going?" she asked, smiling as he zipped her suitcase shut himself. He only said one word, Jeju. By sunrise, they were on a private flight to Jeju Island, the soft paradise where the ocean hummed like a secret. For once, Jeju left his phone behind. No assistants, no schedules, just him and her. The wind was warm and sweet when they arrived. Felicity's sundress fluttered as she stood at the cliff's edge, staring at the turquoise horizon. "This doesn't even look real," she whispered. "Neither do you," Jeju said quietly, standing behind her, his arms circling her waist. She leaned back against him, closing her eyes. "You're different here. I'm free here," he said. "Free because I'm with you." That night, they walked barefoot on the beach, waves brushing their feet. The stars stretched endlessly above them, silent witnesses to the kind of love that doesn't ask permission to exist. "Do you ever think we'll stop being a story people talk about?" she asked softly. He turned to her, brushing salt-scented hair from her face. "Maybe one day, but I don't care if they do. You're not my story, Felicity. You're my peace." Then he kissed her, deep, slow, and hungry for every second the world had stolen from them. Jeju changed everything. Every morning, Felicity woke to the sound of waves and the warmth of Jinwoo's arm draped over her. He'd whisper against her skin, half asleep, "Stay, just 5 more minutes." They cooked breakfast together, her teaching him how to fry eggs properly. "You can't buy perfection, Mr. CEO." And him trying, failing, and pretending he didn't burn them on purpose. She'd laugh so hard she'd nearly drop the spatula. And he'd stand there, watching her with that look, quiet, full of wonder, like she was something the universe had made just for him. Afternoons were spent exploring, riding bicycles along coastal roads, stopping to taste tangerines from old market stalls, taking photos with fishermen who didn't recognize him. For once, Jeju wasn't the CEO of Kongtech. He was just a man in love, learning to live. On their last night in Jeju, the sky burned gold as the sun dipped into the ocean. They sat on the wooden deck of their villa, a bottle of wine between them. Felicity rested her head on his shoulder. "You've changed so much, Jeju." He smiled faintly. "Because you touched everything I thought was frozen." She looked up at him. "Do you ever wish you'd met me under different circumstances?" "No," he said without hesitation. "If it wasn't complicated, it wouldn't have been real. You didn't just enter my life, Felicity. You rebuilt it." He leaned closer, his voice dropping. "You made me feel. You made me want things I never dared to want." Her heart fluttered. "Like what?" He hesitated, brushing his lips near her ear. Like waking up beside you for a lifetime. Her breath caught, not because of fear but because of how much she wanted that too. She turned to him and kissed him, slow and tender, their hands finding each other as the world melted away. Under the soft sound of waves and night breeze, they forgot the rest of the world existed. When they returned to Seoul, they weren't the same. Something in Jeju had softened. He smiled more, laughed easier, and even his employees whispered about how different he seemed. Felicity started her own interior studio, Solace Designs, where her first major project was redesigning an old library into a modern cultural hub. Jeju supported her silently, never overshadowing her success. One afternoon, she arrived at her studio to find it filled with lilies and a note on her desk. To my peace and chaos in equal measure. Never stop building beauty, because that's what you've done to my life. Jeju. She smiled so brightly that her assistant paused and said, Miss Johnson, whoever that man is, keep him. Months later, they stood again on the rooftop of his building, the place where their story had once begun in secret. But now there was no hiding. The night air was cool, and Seoul shimmered like liquid gold below them. Jeju pulled her close, his hand on the small of her back. Do you remember the first night you came up here? He asked. I remember you trying not to fall for me, she teased. He smiled, and failing miserably. She laughed softly, resting her forehead against his. You know what I love about you? She whispered. Everything. I hope. No, she smiled. The way you love quietly. The way you look at me like I'm not foreign, not strange. Just yours. He kissed her then, slow and endless, the city's lights flickering below like 1,000 witnesses to their truth. In that kiss there were no words, only love. A love that had been forbidden, fought for, and finally, fearlessly embraced. The air in Seoul had turned cool again, the first hints of autumn slipping through the city. Felicity stood beside Jeju as their car pulled up before the Kang family estate. A quiet mansion surrounded by tall pines and quiet disapproval. She could feel Jinwoo's hand tighten around hers. Are you nervous? She asked softly. He gave a low chuckle. I run a billion-dollar company. Face investors who'd eat me alive. But yes, I'm terrified right now. She smiled and squeezed his fingers. Then let's be terrified together. Inside, the house smelled faintly of cedar and tradition. His mother, elegant and poised, greeted them in a hanbok of pale silk. Her eyes paused on Felicity, polite, curious, assessing. So, you are the woman my son speaks so highly of, she said in careful English. Yes, ma'am, Felicity replied with a respectful bow. Thank you for welcoming me into your home. The older woman nodded, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. You are not what I expected. Jinwoo's voice was quiet but firm. Mother, she's exactly what I needed. Dinner was delicate but tense. The clink of silverware echoed between careful silences. Felicity tried to be her warm self, answering questions about her work, her family, her culture, but she could feel the unspoken question hanging in the air. Is she good enough? When they finally stepped outside into the garden, she sighed. I think your mother hates me. She doesn't hate you, Jinwoo said, wrapping his coat around her shoulders. She just doesn't understand you yet. She smiled faintly. And what if she never does? He brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. Then I'll love you enough for both of us. The moon hung above them, pale and soft. Felicity leaned into his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady against her. You're not used to fighting for something, are you? She whispered. He smiled. Not until you. And under the quiet moonlight of his family's garden, he kissed her, slow, deliberate. A promise that no disapproval could break. Over the next few weeks, Jinwoo's mother softened, if only slightly. Felicity helped her prepare kimchi, learning each step with care. They shared small laughter when Felicity's seasoning went too heavy, and for the first time, Jinwoo saw his mother smile at her. Not as a guest, but as a person. That night, when Felicity told him about it, Jinwoo's eyes warmed. She smiled at you? He asked, almost in disbelief. She did, Felicity said proudly. Maybe she realized I'm not here to take you away from her world, just to build something beside you. He kissed her forehead. You always find a way to melt walls I thought were permanent. She smiled, curling against him on the couch. That's because you've built so many of them. I just bring a little warmth. Jeju chuckled. You're fire, Felicity, and I'm done pretending I can live without burning. Winter came, and Seoul shimmered under white snow. Felicity loved the season. It reminded her of how opposite they were yet how perfectly they fit. One morning, she woke to find Jeju cooking breakfast, or trying to. He was in an apron, sleeves rolled up, and the kitchen smelled like a mild disaster. She laughed softly. Is that supposed to be pancakes? It was supposed to be, he said, flipping a very unrecognizable shape. She walked up behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. You're adorable when you try. He turned his head slightly, smiling. You make me want to try. That's the problem. Felicity lifted onto her toes, kissing his cheek. Then don't stop trying, Mr. CEO. Later, they stood by the window, watching snow drift down over the city. Jeju slipped his arm around her waist. I used to think love was a distraction, he murmured. And now it's my focus. You're the only thing that feels real when everything else feels like noise. Felicity smiled softly, resting her head against him. You make even silence sound romantic. He laughed quietly. That's because with you, silence isn't empty. It's home. One evening, Jeju brought her back to his rooftop, the place where their love had begun, where everything forbidden had turned into something unbreakable. The city glowed beneath them, its lights scattered like stars fallen to earth. He stood behind her, his arms circling her waist. Do you ever think about how far we've come? He asked. She nodded. From stolen glances to public love. From fear to peace. He turned her gently to face him. I don't know what the future looks like, he said quietly, but I know I want to see every version of it with you. Her lips parted, heart racing. You're starting to sound like forever. He smiled, brushing his thumb along her jaw. Maybe I am. Then, under the Seoul skyline, where their story had once been whispered, he kissed her, slow and deep, the kind of kiss that carried years of battles, healing, and devotion. Snow began to fall again, dusting her curls in white. He pulled her closer, whispering, I don't need tomorrow yet, just this moment, just you. And as the city hummed beneath them, Felicity knew. They were no longer running from love. They were living it. Winter gave way to spring, and with it came the day Felicity had both longed for and feared. Her family was coming to Korea. Her mother, Mrs. Johnson, and her younger brother, Eli, were visiting from Ghana to see the life she had built with Jeju, and to meet the man who'd stolen her heart. As the plane touched down at Incheon Airport, Felicity's stomach fluttered. Jeju stood beside her, dressed simply in a white shirt and beige coat, but looking every bit the gentleman he was. He reached for her hand, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. You're shaking, he teased softly. I'm nervous, she whispered. My mom doesn't meet people lightly. He smiled faintly. Neither do I, so maybe we'll understand each other. When her family appeared in the crowd, Felicity ran to them, laughter and warmth filling the air as her mother hugged her tightly, Eli shouting, You look so Korean now. Jeju waited a step behind, hands politely folded, watching the reunion with a quiet smile that spoke volumes. When Felicity finally pulled him forward, her voice was soft but proud. Mama, this is Jeju Kong. Mrs. Johnson's eyes studied him carefully, the way mothers do when they're measuring the soul behind a man's smile. You're the one who made my daughter stay in Korea, she said. Jeju bowed respectfully. I hope I made her want to stay, ma'am. The older woman's expression softened just slightly. We'll see. For days, Jeju tried to make her family feel at home. He took them to the palace gardens, taught Eli to make kimchi pancakes, and even joined them for an African dinner night at Felicity's apartment. The table was alive with laughter, Ghanaian spices mixing with Korean side dishes, music playing softly in the background. Jinwoo, careful but curious, took a bite of jollof rice and his eyes widened. "This is perfection," he said honestly. Mrs. Johnson raised a brow. "Not too spicy for you?" He smiled. "If Felicity can handle my mother's kimchi, I can handle anything she loves." Felicity laughed, nudging him playfully. Smooth answer. Later that night, when everyone had gone to bed, Felicity found Jinwoo standing on the balcony, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. "My mother likes you," she whispered, stepping behind him and wrapping her arms around his waist. He smiled. "I wasn't sure she would. She saw the way you look at me," Felicity said softly. "That was enough." He turned, his gaze tender. "The way I look at you? Like you found peace after a storm." He brushed a hand along her cheek. "That's exactly what you are." And under the night sky, he kissed her. Slow, grateful, full of love that didn't need to be proven anymore. The next morning, while Jinwoo prepared tea in the kitchen, Mrs. Johnson approached him quietly. "I've watched how you move around her," she began. "How careful you are. That's good. But love isn't just care, Mr. Kong. It's courage too." He looked up, meeting her steady eyes. "She taught me both." The older woman studied him for a moment, then smiled, a real one this time. "She always said she wanted a man who would see her soul before her color. I think you do." He nodded slowly. "I don't see her as different. I see her as my beginning." Mrs. Johnson's eyes softened. "Then keep her heart safe, Jinwoo. She gives it only once." When Felicity entered moments later, she saw her mother smiling. A rare, quiet approval that made her heart swell. Episode 1 ends here. The next episode comes up soon. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment. Also like, share, and subscribe to my channel and click on the notification icon so that you will get notified whenever a new story is uploaded.